In the next two videos, we're going to take a look at compression, and we're just going to get into it at a very basic level. And so we're going to start by taking a look at this session and looking at this bass part here. So if you look at the bass part in Soul Cries Out, you'll see that the waves have a peak to them, right? This is where the note is plucked, and it's the loudest part of the note, and then that note dies away. If you've ever played a guitar or a bass guitar, you know that that's the way the notes work. They die away. There are some other smaller, like quieter notes in here, right? And these are the sort of the shorter in-between notes between the major notes. If we take a listen to this, you'll see what I'm talking about. And then we have these shorter notes. And so the bass player here is not really like going full out on every note, right? Some notes are louder than others. Now, we want some dynamic contrast in our music. We don't want everything to be completely loud all the time. But if we can do something about these notes and maybe make the ends of the notes a little bit louder and make the quieter notes a little bit louder, then that bass part is going to cut through the mix a little bit better. And that's what we're going to achieve with compression. So to load the compressor, I'm going to go back to the mix window here. I just prefer looking at it like this. You can load it from the edit window. And I'm going to go to Plugin, Dynamics, Dyn3 Compressor Limiter. And the compressor will pop up here. And in this video, I'm just going to go over the controls, and then I'll do a second video showing you how to implement those controls. So if we look here, you can see that there are 6 main knobs, right? There's gain and threshold, ratio and knee, and attack and release. And so the threshold is going to determine how loud does the material have to be for the compressor to start working. Let's play that and see if it crosses the threshold. And you can see most of the notes crossing the threshold there and some of them not. So it's crossing the threshold. You can move the threshold up and down, and I'll show you how to figure out where the threshold is supposed to be in the next video. But this is the threshold control. Threshold works hand in hand with ratio. Ratio is the strength of the compression. So right now it's sitting at a 3-to-1 ratio, meaning that for every 3 decibels above the threshold that the music is, 1 decibel above the threshold will come out. So if the note was 9 decibels above this threshold, only 3 would come through because of the 3-to-1 ratio, right? If 30 decibels were over the threshold, only 10 would come out. And so it's a way of restricting how loud the signal can be. You can make the ratio, lighter, weaker, right? Especially in acoustic forms of music like classical music and jazz. People usually prefer a lighter compression ratio. In other more popular styles of music like hip hop or EDM, you can use a whole lot of compression. It's very common. A 1-to-1 ratio does nothing. That should be noted. If you're using 1-to-1, you might as well not be using the compressor. So light compression is anywhere from like 1.5-to-1 all the way up to maybe like 4-to-1. You get a little stronger going between 4 and 10, really strong from 10 to 20. Anything over 20-to-1 is considered limiting, and we're going to cover that in another video. But this knob goes all the way up to 100-to-1, so you have a wide range to choose from. And again, if we play this, you can see this meter here. This is the GR meter, the gain reduction meter. And the stronger the compression, the more gain reduction we're going to have. So when it does cross the threshold, it's stomped on really hard. And if I lower the threshold, it's getting pretty extreme there. Okay, so then this brings us to the gain knob. So we just looked at the gain reduction meter, and the function of this knob is that any gain you lose in the compression process, you want to make up for it here. So essentially, you want to try to match the gain reduction meter to the gain knob. Now, that's not true 100% of the time, but it's a general guideline for when you're beginning. So if I play this, and I'm going to lower that threshold just a bit so we can see this more easily. So right now, we're getting around 6 decibels of gain reduction. So I'm going to match that to 6 decibels of makeup gain. Whoop, not 9, 6. Come back. There we go. And so that should match. These in and out meters here can also help you. This shows you the signal going in and the signal coming out. They shouldn't be radically different. The out is probably going to be a little bit higher, but like if it's way up here and this is way down here, something's going on. Or vice versa. They should be about even. Now the knee is the sort of the severity of the curve here. And if I have a higher number in this plug-in here, it gives us a gentler knee, okay? A smoother onset of compression. And this is pretty useful in musical contexts. And so if I'm doing like speech or something, I usually use a hard knee. But in music, I'll often use a much softer knee. It just makes the compression less noticeable. You don't hear it quite as much. It does take a while to hear compression too. If you're not hearing all the changes that are happening, don't worry too much. Just do your best. And then the last 2 knobs here, we have our attack and release. Attack determines how quickly the compressor starts compressing, and release is how quickly it lets go. And that has to do with the threshold too. Once it crosses the threshold, how quickly does it attack? And once it falls below the threshold again, how quickly does that compression let go? And so, I mean, it's hard to say set this attack time for this instrument or voice and this is the release time for this instrument or voice, because it really depends on the context, right? A snare drum, if you have a snare drum, for instance, that's just crazy loud and it just sounds too aggressive, you might want to have a really fast attack to cut down those transients, right? But a lot of the time you want to let the transients breathe through and not be compressed. So you would have a slower attack time for a drum, for instance. So if you want the whole sound to be compressed, then you want to have a short attack and a longer release. And if you want the beginning of the sound to go through uncompressed, then you're going to want to have a longer attack. If you can set the release to be kind of in rhythm with the notes, and let's see if we can achieve that here. I'm going to set this attack at maybe 10 milliseconds. This is going to let the plucks of the bass go through, and we'll play around with the release time. Okay, like a faster time. Okay, so you can see it's kind of moving in rhythm with the notes. It's not doing anything drastically outrageous, and that's a good thing. If you have improper attack and release settings, it can start to affect the timbre and the rhythm of the music in interesting ways. So those are the 6 knobs. Those are the 3 meters. We're going to ignore this side chain section for now. That's for a totally different purpose. And this is the graph showing you the volume level coming in and if it's crossing this threshold or not. In the next video, I'll show you some compression strategies.